My name is Shay Craig. I'm the Dean of Christ Cathedral, and I am interviewing Mother Teresa Lair at St. John's in Great Bend. This is one of several formation opportunities that the diocese is offering us during Lent to talk about the theology of resurrection. We're in Great Bend because how many years ago? 2?
3.
3 years ago, St. John's closed its building and vacated, and the building was sold. And it relocated, and it is open in this new and marvelous space. And the community of St. John's is living into the theology of resurrection in a church. That is, how do we experience resurrection in our congregations? So thank you for joining me. I'm going to try to tell a little bit of the story, and I want you to jump in and correct me as we go along.
Okay.
So St. John's was here in another building, and you discovered that it just wasn't financially viable. You weren't able to do the ministry that was required in that building.
Correct.
And the diocese helped you to part with the building, and then you settled into this space. Is that right?
Yes.
It's significantly smaller and has less of the, parish hall and parking and all those things.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a little better parking than we had at our church, easier to get into. The smallness of the church makes it more personal, more family-oriented, like we're a close-knit group of fellow Christians.
Did most of your members make their way over?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Those that were still alive, anyway.
So, as I recall it, your congregation closed and you came here.
Correct.
But there was a period of time, a sort of a rest, I'm going to call it time in the tomb. And you spent that time in discernment?
Figuring out whether we wanted to move forward from hopelessness, which is what we were living under the burden of, to how can we resurrect our congregation to live out the Christian ethic that Jesus taught us to go and help people.
So I love that. So when you'd come to this space and you'd had a minute to rest, you asked yourself a question.
What was needed in our community that we could, now that we were out of the burden of the church, building, grounds, and worry, how we could be visible in the community as St. John's Episcopal Church, and who needed our help.
And you do help people here, right? You
Correct.
Tell me, you do a monthly meal.
We used to do a monthly meal. We have now joined, we started a ministry where there are a total of 5 churches that have combined to be called Friends in Faith. And we meet now on the 3rd Sunday of a month. So just about 4 or 5 times a year. Mm-hmm. And we gather we're starting to now gather in an individual church, and they hold the service, do the service in their order, and the rest of the other 4 of us have parts in it, so that each congregation is represented in the church. And then we have a potluck afterwards, and sit among the congregations and learn about other people, and that we're not so different. We have learned that we're not so different from other congregations, and it's not so scary anymore to be out in the world as St. John's Episcopal Church, separated from the Lutheran or the Methodist or the Christian church. And so we've started that.
That's beautiful. A lovely ecumenical service. And then do you do outreach in the community as well?
Yes. We belong to an organization called Care Portal, which is a subsidiary of the Global Orphan Project. But it's more localized in the churches in counties. And so we belong to the Care Portal of Barton County. It's not we're not restricted for just our county. Sometimes we've reached out to other counties that have needs. But basically in there, and there's several churches, other churches in the community that participate in that. And they're usually vetted families through DCF, St. Francis Ministries. Now the school district has gotten involved in it. So counselors that know the need of children or families, and then they send a need to the care portal director. Then they send it out to the churches, and then we respond how we can to meet a need.
And that's doable for your congregation.
Yes.
So I love what I'm hearing about this, and I love this story because it really embodies resurrection in a congregation, right? There was going through the cross, there was the loss of the burden of the property, but as you say, there was liberation on the other side,
yes.
and hope. After a period of waiting, there was hope. And
Correct.
I think the key, when I hear this story, the key is the question that you ask. The question wasn't, how do we get more pledging units? Or how do we get more people into the pews? The question is, how do we live into what Jesus called us to do? How do we feed sheep? And that's guided you into your wider community and into a wider community that your congregation is experiencing.
Right, and as far as feeding, that's another ministry that we do have, and we did start that just before we sold our building. So we had maybe 2 meals, but we provide meals every other month, one Sunday every other month, to the Dream Center here in town, which have a ministry of feeding the homeless, those in need. And so we have joined forces again before we closed our church with the First Congregational United Church of Christ. And so that they are a small congregation, we're a small congregation, and it doesn't take much effort financially to provide a ministry of feeding. And so that has been something we've been doing now for a little over 3 years as well. And we really enjoy that.
I love it. I love hearing that that the vision of being a church has stayed very faithful to the gospel throughout this transition. And that's really where I see the resurrection theology here is not that there wasn't difficulty, and that self-care, that period where you just rest in the tomb and wait until you're ready, and then asking the right question and answering it within your capacity and within your joy. I had the privilege of visiting a number of churches this summer, and this was one of the most hopeful and joy-filled in the diocese, which is why I really wanted you to speak to resurrection theology in the congregation.
And I feel that we have done, we do feel that, because anytime a need comes up, I have to just present it to the congregation. And recently it was because of budget cuts to friendship meals and elder care. They were in need of money. And so presented it to the church to say, how do we as a church help the community, those seniors, the needy, getting meals every day? And so I asked if we could give a certain amount, and it just popped out of one of the parishioners, said, well, what about $100 a month?
Oh, nice.
And it was, everybody just looked at each other and said, yep, I think that sounds great. So we're going to begin that starting this next month. So,
I love that.
It's not going to be a big game changer, but every penny counts, and we just want to help where we can with what we have while we have it.
Well, there you go. That's the gospel, right? That's the gospel right there. So the question I think that we leave with congregations that are using this and individuals that are using this as a means of self-discovery during Lent is what would it look like if we were no longer concerned with having a church, and we became more concerned with being the church? How would that theology of after the cross and into the being an Easter people, How would that look like in your congregation? So, thank you.